Yep, episode 3, and I've been pretty slow to start producing these videos. Still trying to get the sound right and the technical stuff right, but we'll do. Um, there's been a lot going on. Interestingly enough, I went to see Russell Brand the other day in town, and I think that it was Matt Tabili who came up with it. There's an interesting thing, we're censoring ourselves. It's kind of got into our mind, and I feel we're overcomplicating things, actually. Things are very simple. At the end of the day, we live on an island, and if we want to make changes, I believe generally the British people are pretty sensible. And whilst there's been a lot of misinformation, I do believe that when it comes to democracy, rights, and particularly the economy, the British people will come to the fore. It's, at the end of the day, we're constantly being bombarded with negative news, things that are not happening, And it's interesting. I noticed I spoke on GB News the other day, and it's all about personal. I know it was about banking reform, and should we trust? Do this government? Are they out of touch? Well, of course they're not in touch with the general mood of the people, and the general mood of the people is that they're having to consume over many, many years a lot of difficult issues, whether it be cost of production crisis from our great global resources, or from energy prices from Ukraine, from interest rate hikes. And I really went on to GB News to talk about the fact that, interest rates, we've been in this boom bust cycle for a long, long time, largely because there's been no inspirational thinking, although about banking reform and about what drives an economy. It's producing goods and services in the real economy. And that's not centrally led. That isn't led by a centralized system. That doesn't work. And I think we've said it before. If there was UK PLC, we'd be asking, and we were shareholders, we'd be asking for new management. And that management doesn't really apply to Conservative, Labour, Liberal. It applies to our parliamentary democracy. These career politicians do not understand that our livelihoods depend on what we produce. And we use the complication in the system for making it highly complicated. And I think it's time that we really came to understand that there are solutions. Whatever problem has been made, I think Kennedy's quote is, whatever problems we have, man can resolve them. And I think it's time to understand that, it's about having an economy. And that is where, if you disagree with what's happening, only the British people can have a voice to change that. It starts here. It starts at home. And whilst we can connect with the global community, I think that is amazing that we have this connectivity. The truth of the matter is, though, we have to still produce goods and services at home. We have to have an economy that works, and we have to have a money supply system that's going into the real economy. And what is the real economy? That's the small businesses that employ 19 million people throughout this country. And that money supply is not reaching them. The quantitative easing went into financial asset creation or into consumption spending. That isn't producing a strong economy. And I think that, I think we're hearing constantly the problems, and we have two extremes. We have mainstream media constantly saying one thing, and we have alternative media saying another. And I listened to someone the other day, and he's totally confused because it's a bombardment of information. And actually things are not as difficult or as complex as we make them out to be. And it's about time that we understood that we can actually make changes. No one can force anything on us. And it's about the British people who, in my view, generally are educated and sensible, despite what has been happening over the last number of years. The key is the economy. I mean, without an economy that doesn't produce its own goods and services, apart from these, and we have these totally inefficient corporations who can't even give you their surnames, and it's the same with our bureaucracy. I mean, are you tired of trying to talk to people who won't give you their name? And, it's like dealing with banks. Banks were here to be part of the system. And, China made the decision to do local banking in the 80s. And local banking, community banks, is what fuels GDP and GBP transactions. We need to be able to... So anyway, I'm going to be talking like this. I'm probably I'm going to have a bit of fun for myself, actually. This is about fun. It's about laughter. And how often are we I'm going to be interviewing people, particularly political parties that are growing up. I mean, we hear all these big players, but they are, the one thing that is true, they are out of touch with the people. But the truth of the matter is, it's not about personalities, it's about principles. And the truth, if we don't come to grasp with the fact that with some inspired thinking, we can change the circumstances around us. And it is about inspired thinking. It's not about doing the same thing over and over again with the same result. I mean, there'd be, Werner Economics says that interest rates are positively, through empirical evidence, they're positively correlated, not negatively correlated. In other words, that means if you have higher interest rates, you should have higher growth. But it depends where that money supply is going. If it's not going into the local economy, but going into financial asset creation or into consumer spending, it isn't going to produce goods or services. I really do understand that sort of, we have so much information, and yet at the end of the day, we're all Democrats, and most people in England and Wales and Scotland want democracy, and we want to have science that is genuine, it's not profit-based, and then who speaks the loudest gets the loud, and who's got the biggest money. It doesn't work that way. Science doesn't ever work that way. It's like that is like the church. And I have to say, not that impressed with listening to people blowing other people out. And how could you ever have dialogue in a great country like this? And you don't build a country like that. You don't build it from weakness. You've got to build it from strength. And strength requires a degree of spirit and spirituality. It requires belief. It requires honesty. It requires truth. It requires the ability to change your opinion and a mind. Sometimes we don't get it right. Human beings, we are fallible. We make mistakes all the time. And it's about time we just kind of accepted that instead of trying to punish people. Because they've turned left when they wanted to turn right. It really is. I have to say, it's funny, really, because it's comical how we behave to one another. This is a great country, beautiful day. We've had some great weather. It's absolutely amazing that we can actually do lots of positive things in this country. But we need the spirit of light and truth and inspiration, not a positive mindset necessarily, but the light, treat each other, that's one of the common biblical things, love thy neighbor as thyself. Don't go around abusing your neighbor because they don't agree with you. I've often heard this in democracy. I have a bias in democracy. I believe in democracy. I believe in freedom of speech. That's a bias when people are telling you when the centralization of the system is trying to control from the center, the centralization of power and capital with people who have not dealt with their egos means that eventually they only want it for their own ends. And they will justify it. And that's what the mind does. They will justify it, is that they're saving humanity in some great big approach to life. That just isn't how it works. Our own egos are, to thy own self be true, and to be self-aware is very difficult to come to terms with. And, pride, anger, frustration, envy, lust, what the used to call the 7 deadly sins, they're present all the time. Unbelievable greed. And not everyone in this nation is like that, So at the end of the day, you've got to share. They say, I'm going to digress a bit. Under the divine right of kings, a good king was the one that realized that if his people were happy, his position was secure. And the truth of the matter is, no matter how much power, no matter how much money you have, unless the people are well fed, well supported, you will not be able to control them indefinitely. You are sowing the signs of your own weakness, and I think that weakness is usually actually needs what they would call as an addiction. Addiction to power and addiction to capital is a serious issue for, I think, not only on a global level, but a national level. And I think that things are a lot more simpler than we think. And anyway, God bless you all. And this is such a beautiful country. We're having beautiful weather, loving it. And we're going to be doing some interviews when I get my sound together, I hope. And I can see that my sound and my mouth don't seem to correlate, but it doesn't really matter. I'm in the learning game. I don't mind how many mistakes I make. And there you go. God bless you all. Speak to you soon.